This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
Well, we know that the Vachons are going to wrestle in Madison Square Garden for Vince Sr. And while they're going to pitch Vince about the Giant, Andre the Giant. And I believe it's the Vachons who even suggest perhaps you could book Andre around the country. And I guess the thinking was there's not much more the Vachons can really do with him since he'd been in Montreal for several years. So a couple of months later, he does make his debut for the WWWF. It's in Philadelphia. It's a handicap match, but for several days, posters had been hung on the walls in Madison Square Garden to hype the March 26th debut of Andre the Giant. And, obviously it takes Vince Sr. 1 week to offer Andre the opportunity to represent him and be his agent. And so he starts booking Andre around the country. Similar to the way the NWA would book their world champions, where Andre would get a percentage every time that a promoter used his services. So he's able to service these other territories, but Vince still has him in his territory as well. And he's going to average about 3 big shows a year for Madison Square Garden, from 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, and 79. Vince Sr. had the vision of less is more. We've got to use this guy as an attraction. Do I have that right?
Yeah, but Vince had that vision, with a lot of guys and everything. And that when you started in the territory, the first thing you got was your out date. It's when you're finishing up.
Right.
Because it was very seldom the guys were able to stay there for years and years. But if you were coming in as a heel to work with the champion, the first thing you got was, all right, here's your start date and here's when we're going to finish you up. And you knew exactly when you were finishing up and when you were leaving. So it was obvious, you look at an attraction like that and you can't see the 7'4" giant wrestle every week. Then you've seen him and then he becomes normal. He becomes your next door neighbor. I see him all the time and it's not special. The rest of the country hadn't, and you could book him all over and he could make, a territory once, maybe twice a year. Sometimes different places. Houston would get him a couple, 2 to 3 times a year. And then every time that he came in, he was special and he was unique and people would see him the first time and you'd tell your friends, oh my God, you got to see this 7'4" giant. He's larger than life. And the legend grows each and every time. The less you see him, the better.
Let's talk about 1974. I think it's in this year that he gets invited to be on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Carson's not there that night. He's got a guest host, but still, for a professional wrestler to be on the Tonight Show in 74. And this is an era where, we're pre-cable. People have, 2 or 3 stations at most. And to have an opportunity to see a professional wrestler on the Tonight Show, that's pretty rare air. That's a pretty monumental deal, is it not?
Well, Andre was pretty fucking rare and monumental in and of himself. So everybody was talking about the 7'4" giant and putting his hand over everybody's face. And I think it was Joey Bishop, maybe, that there's a famous picture of Andre putting his hand over Joey Bishop's face. So it's good for the business. Gets the boss out there.
It's so good that at the end of 1974, he's listed as the 5th biggest draw in the world. He's even featured in the Guinness Book of World Wrestlers as being the world records, rather, as being the highest paid wrestler in the world. They say his documented earnings exceed $400,000, which these days doesn't seem like a ton of cash, but adjusted for inflation, that's like over $2 million. So he was doing pretty well for himself. What did Andre like to spend money on?
Well, he had to spend money on all of his clothes, obviously being custom made. And the beauty of it was, really he only had time to spend it on wine and clothes and food, because he was on the road most of the time. And it wasn't like if you're in a territory, at least you're going to get home a couple nights a week. Andre didn't get home. His home was the road. So there wasn't an opportunity to go out and say, well, I really love my four-wheelers. Great. You can love them all you want. You're not going to ride them anytime soon.
Right.
So it was a time where he just traveled all over the world, and his home was a suitcase.
Jarvis says, was it hard to sign Andre to an exclusive contract when he came to the WWF in the mid 80s? Or was there some pushback from the fact that he couldn't work in the territories as he had been doing up to that point? I know you weren't there, but I'm sure it's something you're at least aware of.
Well, but you still booked Andre even before the 80s. You booked Andre through Vince McMahon Sr. So Andre did have a contract with Vince Sr. and did, whether it was a handshake contract or not, it was, the bookings went through Vince. But, you know, the funny thing about it is back in the day, Andre knew who he wanted to work with. And if Andre wanted to work somewhere, Vince wasn't going to tell him no.
Right.
So if you could be sitting with Andre and say, hey, boss, I've got, can we look at some dates? I've got, you know, date here, you know, coming up in the next year or two. Andre would write in his book, you know, Houston, Beaumont, whatever. And that was it. He was going to be there. You could count on him. Write down in your book the dates on Andre, and you could talk to him that night and not see him again for another 6 months and feel confident that he would be there on that date in 6 months.
Wow, man, that's impressive.
But that's the way that you did business back then with like a lot of the top stars. You know, superstar Billy Graham would come in and just do Houston. Paul would get dates on him and just write them down. Mascaras, the same thing. You know, they would just write dates down and, okay, I got it in my book, and they would be there.
JPS wants to know, was Bad News Brown the only one who ever got a Cleveland steamer from Andre the Giant? I guess we should explain. There is a famous match that I'm sure you've heard about where Andre had been drinking, and during the course of a match had a situation, and that situation resulted in a lot of splatter on Bad News Brown, who became a new shade of brown, rolled out of the ring, went straight to the showers and all of his clothes. And I don't think those fans will ever forget that sight, will they?
I think that any time that a Giant explosively shits all over someone is a sight that you wouldn't erase from your memory anytime soon.
I'm sure. I mean, I know you weren't there. It didn't even happen under a WWF banner, I don't think, but you had to, this became one of those telephone, telegram, tele-wrestler type deals, right?
Yeah, and again, I think that sometimes it's been told so many different ways throughout the years that who knows how much, you know, of the truth of what actually really happened there. Did Andre fart and he smelled shit and thought, oh my God, I got to get out of here? And, you know, who knows? But yes, it's a legendary story.
It is funny the way you see those stories evolve. Like Bobby Rhodes tweeted, did Andre really take shits on the beds of the hotel and wipe his ass with the curtains? No.
Well, there's no guarantee. We don't know that he didn't do it. Ain't no guarantee there, buddy.
It's so weird to me that wrestling is, as a genre, is just fascinated with poop. I mean, it's weird.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.